All right. We are live on stream here for the Children's Media Association and waiting for people to filter in. So you can just.
What if no one shows up?
That's not going to happen. We don't talk about that. I can see people filtering in now. It's going up 2 to 4 to 6. For some reason, we're going up in 2s. Very interesting. But we'll give it another minute or so till we hit that.
We see people's names. I imagine we know a lot of the.
Oh, that's probably true. I think if you went on, I can't, not in this dashboard, unfortunately. I don't think I can, but
yeah,
that would be neat. It's a note for the
I want to
developers.
Say hello to my mother.
There you go.
Yeah.
Emma, anybody?
My mom's asleep at the moment.
Mine too. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Well, now that we have said hello to our mothers, I think we've given people some opportunity to show up. We can get started with the event here. Thank you so much to everybody for tuning in to this CMA Presents. Today we have 2 very special guests who are ready to reveal the world's most important questions answer. What makes the perfect kids game? Obviously, that might not fit within the hour, but I think we'll get a lot closer with these 2 here. They are excellent experts and people who I have had the pleasure of learning from and working with in the past. Jens Peter de Pedro and Emma Assen. So Jens, I will talk about first. He has been perhaps most notably a veteran of Toca Boca in the past, working on things like Toca Hair Salon here, and was a play designer and creative director there. He made some of the most played and beloved games in the kids' mobile genre to this day there, with millions of downloads and millions of plays. He's always creating new things like play mats and interactive coding block toys with Cody Blocks, and now he is serving as the head of games for Noggin. Our other panelist, Emma Assen, is also a game and play designer who has spent years developing and releasing kids games for some of the largest companies in the kids space. She worked on several teams making games and interactives for Nickelodeon for over 8 years, eventually serving as the senior director of interactive for the Noggin app there. She's amassed millions of plays and several Emmy Award nominations in that time, and she now serves as the senior director of interactive at Upoli, a kids media company that creates the Wanjo Kids app, as well as other educational and entertainment content. So, with that introduction out of the way, we'll say with the first 45 minutes or so, we'll have a guided talk. We have some questions prepared for our panelists, and then after that, we can open the floor for questions from the audience. So, starting with the basics, talking about how you guys got into games, the background that you have, and some of your influences. First question being, this is the Children's Media Association after all. Did you guys play games as a kid? And if so, what games did you play?
I definitely did. Thanks for having me, by the way. I'm very excited to do this and happy to talk with both of you. I will say that I played everything I could get my hands on as a kid. And when I was a kid, it's a while ago now, games were pretty primitive. So I played a lot of text adventures. I remember staying inside during recess at school just so I could play on our school computer, Learning Adventure, which was a text-based adventure. I would play with the computer my mom would bring home from her school during the vacation. And everything I could get my hands on. I got my NES console when that was sort of brand new, around age 7 or so, I think. And from then, I don't play the games as much as I used to, but I've had all the Nintendo consoles and definitely count myself as a gamer.
Got it. Yes, I know your answer to this is going to be a surprise to some people because we've talked about this before.
Yes, I did not play a lot of games. I grew up in the 80s. There were games, and I had friends who had these consoles, probably had like 8 pixels each on the screen, but we played some of that, but I didn't play too much. I played Dungeons and Dragons. I enjoyed it. but I have not played games at any point in my life very much. I tried to become a gamer a couple of times and got a console, but I just don't have the patience for it.
Maybe you haven't found the right game.
I think that's probably exactly right. Yeah. Could be.
I don't know.
So,
Yeah, it could happen.
So to that point, if you did not grow up playing games, what was it that got you into making games? Did you learn from someone else? Were there people you met who were doing it, or how did it start for you?
I remember my dad had a colleague who was a researcher also. His name was Dallas Anderson. I thought that was so cool. And my dad was very impressed by this guy because he would design his own card games. He's like, Dallas Anderson makes his own card games. And I was like, wow, my dad thinks that's impressive. Maybe I should become a game designer one day. But then when it came time to choose a career, it was some other things in my head that were going on. I always liked, or had studied children's development at the university, and I thought that was interesting, part of psychology. But I always liked drawing. And I thought if I combine these two interests, then what could I do? And CD-ROMs were big at the time, and the web was just coming about. And it just occurred to me one day in 1996 that I should do children's multimedia. And I went for it.
And here you are today. Emma, how about you?
Yes.
That's very, very interesting. I'm glad Dallas planted that initial seed, whether intentional or not. Emma, how about you?
For me, I think so. I definitely have early memories of not really making games, but I used to check these books out of the school library and take them over to my friend's house who had this Commodore 20 computer, and we would copy line by line this code. We'd take turns typing it in, and we would do pages and pages of this code. And then once you'd finish putting all the code in, you would have a very primitive game. The only problem being that if you got one typo in there, it just wouldn't work. And you would have to go and sort of line by line, check it off and see where you've made the mistake. So that's the earliest memory of like actually making something. But when it worked, wow, that was like the moment. And it wasn't designing my own games, obviously, but it was like, wow, I wrote the code that made the game.
Right.
And then later on, I made my own games. I learned Flash. I started as a Flash animator, and then I figured out that you could do so much with code in Flash and sort of enhance my animations, and ended up making those into games. So I would make silly games. I'd make games that I hosted on Newsgrounds when that was a thing. And from there, I really taught myself Flash, sort of using the internet back then to teach myself that stuff. And I ended up going into the ad agency and making Flash websites. So I sort of veered away from games for a long time, and then came on back into games sort of through joining Nickelodeon back in 2015. And who taught me about making kids games specifically was Amy Kim, who was the producer hired at the same time as me to form this tiny team making play-along videos. And Amy had previously worked at Sesame Workshop, and she knew lots about making games for kids. So she and I worked very, very closely from the moment we started at Nickelodeon. I knew about games, obviously, through my experience, but I didn't know specifically about making games for kids. And I learned so much from Amy, just working in close collaboration with her on those early play-along videos.
Wonderful. I know Amy as well. Hope if she sees this, hello, Amy. Fun shout out for her. So when you do look back at the games that you have made, are there any in particular that stand out? And could you tell us a little bit about why? What sorts of things make them memorable?
You want to go first, Jens?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, I'm Toka Hair Salon is the game that really launched my career, but I had done a lot of games before that. One that comes to mind is Make Babies. which was a game for learning shapes. There would be 6 shapes on one side and 6 exactly equally other shapes on the other side, all with faces, and you would pick a circle, and that's your mother, and you would say, pick a dad, and you pick a square or a triangle, and then it would say, make babies, and these shapes would intersect, and in the middle there'd be a little shape, and that's the baby, and it would pop out. So there could be 36 babies, and you'd get the mathematical name for whatever shape you had created. And it was very simple, but that's one of my favorite ones.
And where did that live? Like, who did you made that for?
I made that for Swedish Public Service Television.
Okay. Got it. So it was all in Swedish, perhaps.
Yes, and all in
Nice.
Flash. And, for us game designers, it's like we're drawing in sand. Right? Like some of our creations just can't be played anymore.
Oh,
Wow. Beautiful.
bring the mood down.
A beautiful metaphor, though perhaps a bit.
Yeah, I
bittersweet.
don't mind it too much,
Yeah, it's true. It happens, right?
Yeah.
What about you, Emma? Any games that you look back on and you really think about?
I think the biggest one for me was the Blue's Clues, the new play along videos that we made. So that was a really fun and exciting time. Previous to that, we'd been making these play along videos that were sort of interactive versions of other shows like Bubble Guppies and Team Umizoomi. These were shows that already were made and completed. But with Blue's Clues and You, we had the opportunity to work with the team that were making that show, developing that show from scratch, as it was a sort of new version. So we were able to really sort of have that experience of developing something alongside the show. And it really stood out to me because we were able to make these games that were featuring live action footage. So it was a really interesting time. We had to sort of basically develop from scratch this way of shooting Josh, the host, to work with our interaction. So we'd have things where, like you saw in that video clip, you're wiping the paw print off. The interaction is to wipe the paw print off the screen with the cloth. But if you go over to Josh and wipe on him, he reacts, and it's like it's tickling. If you touch his face, he's like, so all of that was like, wow, like we can really do this. This is amazing that this is something. But obviously the pre-production for that, I think it was over a year. It was us doing all these sort of test shoots with the staff internal and figuring out how are we going to actually like shoot this. We needed him to sort of stand there and idle because we wanted to give the time for the child to figure out what to do. So yeah, the shots, they were long. The videos, I think, because everything was based on video with our play along videos, those videos were like an hour long because we had so much footage in there of Josh sort of doing all the different combinations of things that would account for the things that the child might do in the scene. Like, are they going to touch this? There was just so much in there. And it was fun as well because we were able to develop some new functionality for our internal tool that we would always use then. We developed specifically the coloring mechanic, I remember, for that before then, there was no sort of coloring. We were faking it to begin with. And then during the development, suddenly we had coloring as a mechanic that we could use. So that meant you could draw the clues in his notebook and you could color them in as well. So it was like this extra layer on top of the Blue's Clues and You show that really was exciting. And I really count those as some of the best work that I've ever been involved in because it was so unique and so much fun. I got to go to Toronto to be part of the shoot and like show Josh, okay, the kid's going to tap on you and you're going to do this. You have to like do a big movement because we're going to cut in the video. We got to mask the cut. So do this big movement. So just having that experience was the best. It was really, really great.
Yeah, it's not every day a game designer goes out and is on a film set for something, right? And working with like a cable television star. It's pretty cool. That's like a very uniquely Nickelodeon and Noggin Games thing. Of course, any network that's making games like that, they have that kind of thing going on. But that is very, very cool. And speaking to that coloring mechanic thing that you were talking about and developing things that are really elevating for like the form and like make something that kids will enjoy even more so than even like a linear experience. What are some of the things that you guys have found like that that kids will find satisfying, like a rule of thumb or something that seems to be tried and true as what will be a satisfying experience for kids?
Yes, I'd be happy to give my take on it.
Go for it.
I've read one book about how to make games.
It
and
works.
It's Level Up.
Yeah.
It's called Level Up by Chris, I think Anderson. I don't remember. But he makes a distinction of what makes a fun show to watch, a fun story, and it's just about all the things that happen and the unexpected twists and turns. And, that's been well established. But a game is not at all about the story very much. I mean, maybe a little bit in the beginning or something, but it's about what you can do as a player. What can I do? So what I think makes a game satisfying for children is to feel like they're doing the thing, whatever it is, whether it's scooping ice cream or cutting hair or driving a car. But it needs to be snappier and even more fun than in reality, really, because no one has patience to sit around and wait for a hot cross bun for 45 minutes in a game. But that's really the key, to feel like I'm doing this. I'm fishing this, using this fishing rod to get a fish or whatever it is.
Right. So many
and it matters, right? Maybe it matters because of the story, but it's just like, wow, I can't believe I'm driving a spaceship right now.
Right. So many of these experiences that are successful, they do seem to be ones that put the child in the driving seat of something they would never be able to do in real life. Like, you're not going to let a kid drive the car or like cut someone's hair. It's like allowing them to do all these forbidden things that they really want to get their hands on.
Yeah. And make it feel tactile. You touch the screen and you hear it, you see it under your fingers,
and reacting immediately to what you're doing. That was so huge for me. I think I would always be adjusting like the snappiness of things when we were making games. Like, it's got to be more immediate. I can't have that little lag at the beginning where the animation doesn't start for like a good few frames. And making animation for games, I think it's so different to making linear animation. And sometimes with animators coming from linear stuff, they got to be sort of trained a little bit about how to make things for games, because it is different. It's like you actually need to see something move immediately and not just sort of ease in gradually. It's got to pop, it's got to bounce and feel like super reactive to your touch. Same thing with sound effects. Like, you can't have that sort of dead air at the beginning. It's got to like snappy and really feel like tactile. That's what it's got to feel to actually feel good.
Yeah. And how about experimentation and like open-ended play in games? Is that something that you feel like you've seen? Is it like a particular age group? Because I noticed that in a lot of games, especially for younger audiences, that's more important. And then things get a little more linear as the kids get older, or like set circumstances for kids. Is that, or I guess it's more structure is what I mean than anything.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very structured play pattern versus very open-ended for young kids. What do you think?
Yeah. Emma, do you want to, or yeah?
You go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I have some thoughts on that. I think when you make a game, you need to make a fun game mechanic. That's at the bottom. Like, you invent the ball, and that's fun, right? But once you have the ball, you could do basketball, you could do soccer or whatever. But think about a little kid. They just want the ball. They're not going to want to play a complicated sport with a lot of rules and who wins and who loses. They just want that game mechanic. And it's the same thing for kids' games. Just make a great game mechanic, and the little kids are just going to want to play with that. And you can't really gamify their play, give them points, have them lose or win. They don't really care about those things. Now, what people do for older kids is they do make the gamification. And that does motivate the older children. But as a play designer, as a game designer, you can get lazy then with a game mechanic and just count on all the gamification around the ball right around that game mechanic, and not think enough about how it feels to do the things, or why you're doing it, or so I think as designers for young children, we do get good, or we should get good at that base game mechanic, making that satisfying.
And I think sometimes we're tasking ourselves with designing games that need to appeal to a sort of wide range of ages, which can be really challenging because, like Jens is saying, it's different motivation. When a child is young, to if it's sort of an age range of like 2 to 5, that's hugely different. The way that the child is playing at age 2, it really is about just touching something and seeing what happens. And like Jens is saying, there's no motivation there about like whether I win the game or not. But it's really sort of the core mechanic. And it is possible to make games that can appeal to wide age ranges, but giving sort of something for everyone in there, it's definitely challenging.
Got it. So pretty good segue there. Thank you for that. What sorts of things should you avoid in kids' games? So I think if it's a younger kid, maybe you avoid certain things. If it's an older kid, you avoid certain things. Is there anything overall for kids that you feel like you've done in the past and you're just not going to do that again because it just didn't work?
I think always making things too complicated. I think a lot of times we've gone into projects thinking, oh, this is going to be great. We've got to fit this in and this and this in, especially if it's an educational game. The need to sort of cram a lot of things in there, and it's really possible to quickly become, end up with something that is overly complicated and either doesn't truly make sense, or all these factors are sort of not working well together. Or like it's filled with things that kids really don't care too much about. So I think that's a big one.
Yeah, it's a really good one. It also makes you focus on like, what is this game really about? Like, what is that core game mechanic, and how can I make it simple? Brings Steve Jobs to mind about the simple designs, and Einstein saying, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't really understand it. Like, you really need to think about what you're doing, and it's easy to throw some points in and make it explode, and you could do this, you could do that, but like, what is it really that we're doing here?
Right, you could do so much, but do you need to, and should you? And I think story within games is difficult too. I think there was always a lot of emphasis on like putting a story into everything. And it's almost like story should complement the game rather than sort of ruling it, at like forcing a storyline into a game. When does it actually need to be there? Is the game fun, and does it actually need to make sense in the real world or in the context of the characters? Maybe it doesn't. It's, if there's an educational goal and a story goal, then you're going to end up overcomplicating things and make it more difficult to design the game as well. And I think having a lot of input from a lot of different people as well on a game is not necessarily a good thing. You can have too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah. My take on story is, it's great to have a story, but it needs to be super short, just at the beginning. And if you can raise the stakes, it's always a good thing. Someone's in trouble, but it only needs to be stated for 3 seconds. And that's really how I've observed kids playing that are little. Like, my niece would come up to me when she was like 4 or 5, and she'd say, "I'm a puppy and I don't have a mother." And it's on, right? We know what we're supposed to play, and it's not an elaborate story, but we both have each other's roles. There's a need, and let's go. And that's really all it takes for a game, and you don't need to elaborate on, course, it needs to end well, but you don't need the backs and forths and the ups and downs and the dialogues and also something that, speaking about dialogue, and something that can really kill a game is too much dialogue. And when you make an educational game, there's a lot of people who want stuff to be clear and to be said and to have been said 3 times. So don't put a lot of writing in, because that just means the kid's going to have to be waiting to be doing something. And remember, the kid wants to be doing something, not hearing something. So any game that has a dedicated writer, I am a little suspicious towards. Like, it's better to have no writer and just keep it short and maybe not the best writing, and then you could have a writer look through it. But it's just my experience. I'm sure people have other experiences that have been great with writers. I like all the writers I've worked with, but I tend to want to have as little writing as possible.
Right. More about the interactivity and the play of the experience, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's sort of looking at it and saying, how can we communicate this without using VO? How can we communicate this without talking? Because there are plenty of ways to visually communicate that something is right or wrong, and to sort of to back up learning as well. You can show visual representation of learning. Everything doesn't always have to be spelled out in words.
So I think this gets pretty much to what you guys were saying about keeping things simple too. But I'm curious what play set, and I added this question just now because it came to my mind. I'm sorry, but what play or setup scenarios seem to work well with kids? Are there things that you've gone back to? I know with Toka that there were a lot of, and I think at Noggin as well, jobs, and like you have a job to do, and this is like a familiar situation to a kid. Is that the main rule of thumb, or are there other ones that you think about in terms of like a play setup or scenario? Jens, what are your thoughts?
Yes, and when we started Toka, we had like different gradients, and we're like, how much reality, how much fantasy? And one of the gradients was like a lot of fantasy. Later we found that paper that we had filled in, and we're like, we didn't do any fantasy. It was pretty much all real. I mean, I think at one point you build a robot. I mean, that's about as fantastic as it ever got. So maybe it was just me and the other play designers thinking that led us down that path. But if kids want to do stuff, yes, it could have been feeding dinosaurs that are purple and that live on a cloud. So I'm sure that would have worked fine too. But we just found that the interactions in regular life were enough. And I think that's just something that I've brought with me. For me, it's about empowering children and giving them opportunity to try things in life. And not to say that feeding a purple dinosaur isn't empowering a child and somehow an amazing experience, but and that's fine too.
Great. Relatability goes a long way.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and if you look at the YouTube videos and social media videos that kids watch, it's just a lot of people doing regular everyday things. So they do like fantastic stories, but it doesn't have to be superheroes and ponies in the sky all the time.
Yeah, and I think the biggest one that we've had success with, I think at Noggin in the past, was food. Like Rai, you and I had this conversation, always sort of pushing to use food in creative ideas, because food is fun and relatable, and everyone is can get behind lots of different types of food. It's great for sort of exploring cultural differences. It's great for introducing new things. I think parents love the idea of exposing their child to food stuff, because it means they may be more willing to try things, and kids love playing with things that they think are yummy, the things they think are yucky, feeding characters things and having them react. It's really such a universal sort of play scenario that it really always goes down well. So when in doubt, I think if you're making a game, put food in it.
At least somewhere, right? If your game for children does not have food in it somewhere, you're probably underrepresenting that element of life. Yeah. So moving to the current world of games, I don't know if you guys heard about there's this thing called AI out there these days that is pretty hot topic going on in our industry and all industries really overall in broader society. But I'm curious how, if at all, you guys are leveraging that technology in your work, and how your views are on it for using it in the future, if you aren't, or if you never will, that kind of a thing. Any thoughts? Start with Jens.
Yeah, so I've only recently started to explore it a little bit in one of the projects that I'm in. I think it has amazing potential, and we haven't seen like even the beginnings of it yet. About 25 years ago, I was at a job and I was working with this developmental psychologist, and I asked him, Laurie, what's the absolute best toy a kid could ever have? And he said, I don't know, Jens. I was a very young man and new in the business. I thought I'd figure something out. And I said, a friend, right? A friend, you could do anything with them, you could talk to them. They remember you. You could do a high five. You could go out biking with them, And I think I was right. I haven't been able to create a friend yet for a child, but I think that day is here where that can actually happen, that you could have a digital friend or 20. And I think kids are going to love it. We haven't seen it much, but kids love talking to Alexa. We know that since a few years back. And videos that you see of kids interacting with ChatGPT, there's a lot of fun to be had. So I think that's what you need. That's what we're going to be making soon. A lot of us who work in kids interactive media, but it's not just a friend. Like if you're locked in with a friend in a room and you have no toys and you're not allowed to play with your bodies, just talk to each other. That's not that fun when you're 5 years old. You want to be running around and climbing and throwing things and building forts. So you want to be doing things with your friend. And I think that's where things will be going. I haven't seen any of that yet, but that's my prediction.
Well, I have been making a friend
Hey.
with AI.
Oh, nice.
Yes, you have.
With my colleagues at Uplaying, we have been working on Ziggy, the emu, who is the app right now is called Talk to Ziggy. Please go download it and try him out. It's V1. It's very early stages, and he is an AI companion. He is a chatty emu and designed to be your friend. So for now, the future holds a lot for Ziggy. We've got lots of plans to develop him further and develop his personality. Currently, we're trying to make him funny. That's my number one goal, which is not easy with AI. the idea of humor and AI, it's a big challenge, but we're up to it. And it's been a really interesting project. It really is my first project that I've been working on, sort of prompting AI, learning how that stuff works, and it's been great. It's really exciting. So we're sort of in the testing stages right now with Ziggy, and figuring out what kids are going to be talking about with him, how to balance the conversation so it's not all. Currently, he just asks a lot of questions, and to me it's a little annoying. So I'm seeing if we're doing some tests now with kids, see if they're sort of similarly annoyed by all the questions and they get fed up with it. But yeah, it's early on, but definitely exciting. I've seen lots of these AI companions popping up around since I've been researching for this project. I've seen some launch and fail. So it's definitely a big business right now, but I think a lot of people are sort of feeling like it's a little too soon. So it's definitely it's an exciting time for this stuff. Elsewhere, you play in our app Wonjo Kids. It's actually something that really excited me about joining that team, learning about how they use AI to speed up their workflows. So all of the artwork for Wonjo Kids and the universe within it, we do games and videos and songs and all that stuff. It's all based on art by an artist, and then the AI was trained on the artist's work, and can now produce images in his style. So if we need an asset, it's very easy for us to generate it using AI, and it will be a consistent style. And it's all the sort of the ethical use of AI really impressed me.
Because it's with his permission, right?
With his permission, exactly. Yes.
Big difference there. Yeah.
it's not scouring the internet for other people's work, ripping them off and not compensating them. So
right.
I felt like that was, that's a sort of transparent, ethical use of AI that the company is doing. So really, I love that approach. And
I've seen that more and more, which is encouraging. But yeah, continue.
Yeah. Just I know a lot of companies. I was just at Kid Street and listening to some panels talking to people who are using AI to make tools, like internal tools for their company, that is really sort of speeding up production processes, helping with scheduling and sort of keeping the team on track. And I think there's a lot of really smart uses for AI that are not going to be sort of the horror of stealing people's jobs and causing concern. So there's a lot to be done with AI for sure.
Yes, agreed. So thank you very much. I think we're going to start taking some questions. So if people in the audience have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I can pull them up here. I have a couple here already. Favorite game? Do you have a favorite game of all time? And if so, what is it?
Such a hard question. Probably not so hard for Jens.
Yeah, even harder for me. I barely like games.
Yeah.
Or series, franchise, whatever. I think comes what's coming to mind. If you can't pick one, then what is coming to mind at least?
Gotta be Zelda for me.
Oh yeah,
I will play every Zelda game, and I will always love it.
But yeah,
Hades as well. Actually, that Hades in more recent years, Hades was a game that really grabbed me, and I couldn't stop playing it.
It's the roguelike game format. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
For me, I would say it's Monument Valley.
Really?
Because I do play occasionally casual games, which I think have more of a resemblance to children's games. And when I saw that game first, I was like, oh, I could have thought of that, but I didn't, But it's such a brilliant mechanic, right, of the fake perspective, but now you can actually cross over there. It's like, you just do it,
It's such a beautiful game.
It is, really excellently, very well designed game, yeah. How about learning and fun in games? Because so often, and we've all definitely experienced this, and I know at least Jens and I have backgrounds in education, and was sort of more our avenue into making this kind of stuff. But have you guys found there's a conflict between learning and fun in games, and how do you overcome it?
100%. There's a learning conflict. My advice is stay away from learning as much as you can. Do not attempt to teach kids anything if you want your game to be fun. Now, we've all worked on learning games, and that's because I have. And for me, it's because I have to. Now, can I make a game about how the rain cycle works or how magnets work? Yes, and I'll happily do that. But when you do that, you start already with a game mechanic, and you have to make it fun, right? So it's someone coming up to you and being like, I want a movie about a hamster that lives in space and is a computer hacker, and that's just going to make it harder than like what story do I want to tell, right? And it's the same thing for a game. Like, what game mechanic do I want to come up with? Like, where do I see an opportunity for play and for fun? It's just when you start with a game mechanic, which is pretty much what you have to do when you do learning, you're just ruling out like all the other 1 billion possibilities that you could have went for. And it's not necessarily the most fun game mechanic, right? Because is it fun to learn 3 times 3? Like it could be okay, but yeah.
Okay.
You could make it more fun, right? But yeah,
it's true. It's yes, more fun. I think is a lot of the goal for why it's even attempted in the first place. Emma, what are your thoughts on that?
Definitely agree. I keep thinking about a moment where I had made this prototype and we tested it with kids, and it was this game where you had a little walkie-talkie and you could hold down the button on the walkie-talkie and tell your character to go up, down, left, or right, and they would move on the screen, and you had to go find something. And there was this moment when we were testing with kids, this kid held down the button and said right when they wanted the character to go left, and the character of course went right, and they immediately self-corrected themselves and said, oh no, left, and got it right. And that stands out to me so much as a moment where the game taught something.
Yeah.
And there was no need for any VO. There was no need for anything else to happen in the game to tell you, no, you're wrong, try again. It was a moment of pure, like, they tried something and it was wrong, and so they immediately corrected themselves and got it right, and it sort of enforced that just this teaching of left and right, and it was fun, and it was just like this this wonderful moment. Right, this is the way to make things. This is it's not that easy. I'm not going to say like, okay, that's the way I'm going to do things from now on, because it doesn't apply to all situations. And it was this moment that really kind of like, I will always keep in my mind going forward. Like, that is the ideal. That is this fun, and the child's learning without sort of too much intervention, and they're experimenting. They're able to fail. They're not being punished for failure. They're just trying things, and that's, I think, what learning in games should be about.
Yes, occasionally you have a serendipitous moment where it's like, this actually is fun, and it's learning.
Yep.
But yeah, usually it's fine. It's fine. Learning games are usually like, okay, it's fine. I could play this, but
yeah. Not to play panelist here. I know I'm the host, but this is something I learned from both of you. Actually, you both have told me this at different points when I was working on games underneath you guys when we were all at Nickelodeon together. Whenever you can use like the skill or whatever you're trying to teach in the like actual situation that you'd use it in real life and make a game out of that, that's the best way to do it. And like, we were developing a game where it's like letters, and you could do something abstract with learning the alphabet and learning what the letters are, or you could have them seating people in an airplane where like they have to actually know what the letter is, and that's how you actually label rows in an airplane seat, and it feels more real and more applied and more like a natural game. And I just always have used that ever since. Even games not for kids, it's like the more you can make something feel really like a natural application of a skill, the more it's like really satisfying to do it well.
Yeah, no, that's another great thing to try to do in games, like you say, application of the skill in the real world, but that also creates a role for the child. Because if the child can answer, who am I? If the game transforms the child into something that empowers them, like, oh, now I'm an astronaut, now I'm a hairdresser, now I'm an usher. And that's all part of that children's imaginative play experience that they are so good at creating for themselves. And they don't need much, but if we could just give them a little role, they're so thankful.
Love that. I have found how to put up the comments from the user, which is kind of neat,
Oh,
which is pretty cool there. So, question here from one of our viewers: can you elaborate on the positive reinforcement in kids' games? So, I guess using positive reinforcement as a learning mechanic in games, how is that applied successfully?
I think it's always important where possible to, to build on, just not just to say good job when you finish something, oh, you did it, but to be able to add a little. I mean, it's adding VO and it's a lot of more talking, but it's being able to say what you did and why that was good in a nice, concise way, and obviously using the visuals to back that up too. But I think a lot of games I see out there that are not so sort of well thought out, they're full of these sort of empty congratulations statements, and they go over and over again. It's like, yay, good job, yay, wow, you did it. And it's like, it's meaningless. So positive reinforcement without sort of any weight behind it in terms of like, just a little bit extra. Good job, you gave the right radish to the beaver. Like something,
Whatever it is they're doing, right? Yeah.
And ideally it comes from the beaver, him or herself.
Right.
Like, make whatever the kid does matter. Like, I seated all these people in the airplane. Great, now we can take off, right? The story continues and you did your job and everyone's happy.
Yeah, the beaver was so hungry, but now he's got a radish and he's so happy.
Yeah. Add emotion, I would say, as much as you can.
Wonderful.
I often try to think of what emotion the game should have, and not just like on the screen, but inside of the person. Like, are we a little bit like, oh, what's going on? Things are popping up at us, or are we slowing down and trying to be pensive? And of course, that's something that movie directors do all the time, with music and lighting and pace of cutting. But we could do that a lot more in games, I feel, at least in casual games and in kids' games, than what's currently being done.
Yeah. What advice do you have for someone just starting out in their career, or what do you wish you knew when you were starting out?
Yes, I have gotten this question before. And what I've told people is it's if you want to be maybe I read into this question, if you want to be a play designer, if you want to be a game designer, but it's good to have, that's a hard job to get like as your first job. So it's good to have something that you can do that's concrete. Like maybe you are a graphic designer, or maybe you are a programmer, or you're a project manager, and you can get into things that way. But if you're just starting out in your career, even earlier, if you don't have your first job yet, I would say what I look for in resumes is demonstrable interest in the areas of interactivity and children. The more of both, the better. But it has to be something. If you're into games, but you have no record of having interacted with any children, that's not, you need to be really good at games then. But even if you've just been a camp counselor once, I'm like, oh, see, they're a great programmer and they've been a camp counselor. This is promising. So it's really like 2 feet, and you have to have at least a little left foot or a little right foot to stand on. if you're completely new to the kids' interactive media business, I would say.
Emma?
I think I would say go make some games. If you're just starting out and you want to get experience and be considered for this kind of role, I think I always look for, have they made their own games? Have they made, they don't have to be big and fancy and complicated. They could, there's a lot of free, very intuitive software out there that lets you make simple games. And even better if you sort of team up with friends who are interested in games too and have made something together, entered game jams. There's just so much of that going on. You can join game jams as a game designer and they'll team you up with people, around the world, and you can work together for a weekend and make a game. And that's, I think, the best experience that you can get. Obviously, it's games rather than like for kids specifically, but it's all like very relevant. And I mean, I come from a background of someone who just has to make things constantly. Like, I'm very hands-on. I love to prototype things. I'm all about like, hear an idea, and I don't want to sort of write a document to describe it. I want to make it immediately. So
Yep.
I would say.
Sorry, I just agree. Yes.
Yeah. Just make stuff, and even if it's made of paper, make games, try them out with your friends. I think that's the best advice I can give.
Wonderful. Very much agree. From our colleague, Julianne. Hello, Julianne. Question that I had from earlier mention of Ziggy. Is there a concern in the industry about kids becoming too dependent on AI friends? And have you implemented any precautions?
I think there definitely is concern. I'm keeping up with research and experts who are researching this stuff. Definitely making sure that we are not doing something that's going to be detrimental to children. It's difficult because it's so new. It's sort of in this space right now where the research really doesn't exist yet. There's obviously like Alexa and stuff like that's been around, and we know how kids interact with voice devices, but the AI component is what is brand new right now. So yes, we're definitely keeping an eye on it. We definitely don't want to be making anything that's, not going to be good. I think it's a fine line between making something that's supportive and nice to a child and something that's so wonderful that they could potentially want to use it too much. Something we are planning with Ziggy for the next version actually is to limit the interaction time that the child can have with him in one go. So we're trying to make Ziggy sort of more like a real entity who's saying, okay, I need to go do this. He's got a life outside of your interactions with him. So we're going to be putting like a 15-minute cap initially on how long you can spend with him. And after that, if you come back, he's not there. There's going to be a note on his door saying, I had to go visit my mom and help her with her shopping or something like that. And it's that's sort of a precaution that we're planning on implementing so that children are not spending too much time with him. And that's sort of just from a gut instinct since we really only started doing this, but just the idea that it shouldn't be something that's available whenever you want.
Makes sense. Seems like Jens is having a little bit of technical difficulties there, so I'll add him back to the stage whenever he stops being a black rectangle. Oh, there he is.
We can hear
I
you.
get you here by voice, but you can't see me. Is that right?
I think that's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know what happened. I'm still
You'll
here.
be the black rectangle if you want to answer the question about AI characters.
No, I don't. That's fine. That was a good answer from Emma.
Okay.
I think we take the next question. Yeah.
Yeah, and Julianne, we do have and to anyone else who's interested, we have an event that is in planning right now, specifically about AI characters and safety around that to make sure that it's not something that like Emma was saying is too addictive, and just basically best practices, because there's been research coming out about the psychology around it. So there's like a dovetailing of academics and the game design community on that. That's pretty building the plane as we fly it right now. But I think it should be an interesting conversation. So here is another question. And we might, depending on how long we go on this one, might be the last question of the night. When you look at the current landscape of games, no need to call out anybody in particular, but what sorts of things do you see working or not working, or what kinds of things do you think are missing from the marketplace, and what kinds of things are you really glad to see out there a lot?
Hmm. Jens, do you want to go?
No, I'm in the dark. I'm in the dark. Yeah, no, we spoke a little bit about this when we had lunch last week.
Yep.
And I mean, there's always people doing good things, but there's also, at least in the Kids Interactive, like things seem to come in waves, right? There were like a time where there were great CD-ROMs, and then people were excited about websites, and then it became about these worlds like Club Penguin, and it became about apps that were, pay to play for $2.99, and then now it's conglomerate into these bigger services. But I feel like in between the tops of the waves, there's also a little bit of a lull, and I feel like we're there right now, and we're going to probably get another technology. I imagine it's AI, and it's going to create a boom. But I do think there's a bit of a consolidation, and I don't know that I can point to a lot of companies that I'm like, wow, I'm so excited about what they're doing. I really like Lingo Kids, and I work there myself, and the things are beautiful. But I guess I'm leaning on not working and not working, but more like somewhere in the middle, where we are at the moment.
I think there's a lot of stuff out there. Just going into the App Store and searching for kids apps, there's a lot of really low quality stuff that's out there that's free or that's sort of ad supported that is bombarding your kid. Like I think like the Talking Tom kind of apps I see, if you get into those and you're playing it a little bit and then you just get ads and
Right.
can't really do anything without having to watch these ads, which is obviously I think not what most parents want as a sort of safe kids app. It's helping out the subscription services, I think, because it's driving parents to that, to ensure that they're having an environment that is good for their kid. But there does seem to be, I mean, anyone can make an app right now and put it out there, and they can sort of claim it's educational and is actually so yeah. But I agree, Lingo Kids is lovely. Pock Pock is another newer app that I think is really beautiful and is really sort of a standout recently as something that's like really inventive interactions and really satisfying interactions that I think I'm sure kids are really loving to use, that like the younger age group.
Yep.
And then this
Yeah,
one will
like
probably be this will be our last one for the evening, I think. Kids making their own games. What sort of future do you see for kids making their own games, aside from just the obvious Roblox? Do you envision a future where kids make their own games, or are we already there?
Definitely already there. Like the stuff that kids are doing with Roblox is insane. And obviously there's been a lot of interest in teaching kids coding. I mean, with older kids generally, but like the Scratch platform and I forget the name of it, but it's the little octopus app.
Octo Studio?
Octo Studio, yeah.
Yes. All right.
Those are so amazing and intuitive, and they allow kids, like, it's really fun to watch a kid figure out Octo Studio and see what they do with it. It's so easy to use that I think it's brilliant, and the way that it puts the creativity into the child's hands. I'm like, I watch my daughter. She's 10 years old, but I watch her play with it, and she uses it to make stories. She's recording VO and attaching it to these characters and making her own movies using it. And then I see another child play with it, and they're making something that's like a primitive game, or not even so primitive, and it's amazing. So yes, give them the tools that are easy to use and figure out, then yeah, it's the possibilities are endless, I think.
Yeah, I love this question because as much kids are doing this already, but it's only going to be 10, 100 times easier to create your own interactive experiences soon. Right now in Roblox, a lot of kids are creating games, but you do have to know Lua to do it. Right? The programming language that's in Roblox. And I think it's about 1% of players who have actually made their own Roblox game. And I'm sure that's a big number, but Roblox is working on text to functionality, where you can speak and fire appears in the middle of the forest, a fire pit, and these experiments are on their way. And once these tools become good enough and kids could just say, like, I want 12 knights in pink armors fighting 3 dragons, and it's just gonna totally explode. And I don't know that we'll ever get to do a game again, Emma and Ryan, because it won't be necessary.
I kind of agree, right? I mean, if kids can do it themselves, they're always so good at it. We've seen that with YouTube, right? It's like kids know what kids like.
You can't stop me making games.
I can try.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you guys again so much for coming in and having this conversation with us. I want to thank the audience for attending and all of your awesome questions. Again, I'll plug that upcoming event for us on AI characters in children's media. That will be very topical. People are asking about it already, so I'm very glad that we're ahead of the game on that and having that planned. But I hope you guys have enjoyed your time listening to Emma and Jens here tell us about designing specifically for kids in the world of games. And we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks again to Emma and Jens. Take care, everyone.
Bye. I'm waving.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.